Okay, hello again. Welcome to another session of C programming introduction. Okay, so the last time we looked at variables, we looked at what they are, we looked at initialization and declaration of variables. We also looked at some of the naming rules for variables. So in this session, what we'll look at is first of all, we'll look at the printf statement that we've seen earlier. We'll also talk about something called placeholders. Don't worry about that, but that leads us to our final subtopic, which is printing variables. Okay, so let's transition to our code and then let's get started. Okay, so we remember this file from the last session, right? So we are going to create a new file and then continue our tutorial in. So in C or in code blocks ID, if you want to create a new file, you can just use the shortcut Control Shift and N. So it will ask you whether you want to save this file, right? And we would click yes. So we'll give it a name, printing variables .c. So always remember the .c extension, else it's going to save it as a plain old file, sometimes a text file, but we need it as .c. Okay, and then we click the save. So over here we just click OK, because just leave the settings at default. So you see we have a brand or a blank file actually. So let's first of all start by putting our header comment over there. So printing variables in C. Okay, so we have pre-processing directives. So stdio.h, and then our main function. Okay, so we have that, right? So now let us run this file and then see what the output will give us. Okay. So I can press F9 to run the file. So immediately you can see that we are getting an error. And if you look at the definition or the error, it says multiple definitions of main. Now you only get this error if you have two files in the project having the main declaration here. So I have it in the variables.c. I also have it over here in printing variables, right? So what should happen is that you should have only one declaration of main in your entire project. So to solve this problem, I'm just going to remove the file that I don't need at this moment. So in this case, we are going to remove the variable.c. So I right click it and then I click remove from project, right? So now I'm left with the printing variables.c. So if I now press F9 to run it again, right, so you can see that we get our output over here. Okay, so that's how you fix this issue if you are having it. So let's go back to our program. So we'll look at we'll do a recap on the printf statement as you have seen from the earlier lectures. We'll look at, like I said, placeholders, and then finally how to print variables that we started working in the last session. Okay, so we all know how the typical printf statement works, right? So I put in the command into the parenthesis, I put in double quotation marks, and then that is where I type what I want to appear on the screen. So for example, this is a new session, and put my backslash n there. So at this point you should know what backslash n does, right? It simply leaves a new line after it writes this particular line. Okay, so we'll just put in printf output text onto the screen. Okay. Command prompt or terminal. So this is specific to Windows, right? On Mac OS they call it the terminal. I mean, on Mac OS and Linux it's called the terminal, but on Windows it's called the command prompt. Right, so running this file again by pressing F9. So let me just put that I can use F9 to run a file in code blocks. So depending on the IDE you use, the shortcuts will be different, but since we are using this, we'll just go with that. So pressing F9 again. So if we switch over to our output view, you can see this is a new session followed by a new line before the program finally exits. Okay, so let's go back to our code. So we've done a recap on the printf statement. So if you have forgotten what it does, I recommend you go back and then go and read it again. Okay, so now let's talk about placeholders, right? So placeholders are key when you want to print variables onto your command window, right? So I gave this example in class and let me just give it again. So imagine you are going to buy watching, right? You go and then there's a queue over there, and let's say you've stood in the queue for quite some time and you wanted to go and take something in your room and come back, right? What you do is that you either tell the person behind you or in front of you that, oh please, I'm standing here but I'm going to take something and come. So by doing that, the person reserves the place for you until you come back. I hope the analogy is clear. It's similar to the way placeholders work here in the program, right? So what happens is a placeholder, right, will, in simple terms, it simply holds the spot, just put that in quotes, for a variable in a print statement, right? So it holds the spot. So what happens is that if you run the program, the placeholder will not appear. When the program is executed, right? But will be replaced by a variable specified. So I hope this makes a bit of sense. The placeholder simply hold a spot for variables, but they don't actually appear in the statement. So how do placeholders look like? Sorry. So in general, you'd see them as the percentage sign followed by a letter over here, right? So for example, if we wanted to, if for the placeholders for integers, which we talked about in the last session. So if you are not still clear on variables, I'd recommend you go back to the last session and go and refresh your memory. So we would have percentage %d. So that this percentage %d is the placeholder for the integer, right? So another thing you should know is that every data type has its corresponding placeholder, right? So the integers, so I'm just going to take off this line from here. Integers are percentage %d, right? So we have floats as percentage %f, and then characters as percentage %c, right? So percentage %d for integers, percentage %f for floats, and percentage %c for characters. So let's actually see how we'd use these in an actual statement, right? So we are going to declare some variables. So I hope you remember what declaration means. So we'll declare and then initialize and then print to see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to declare variables A as 10, B as 40, C as 100. So this is one way of declaring multiple variables on the same line. So long as all of them share the same data type, I can chain them up like this. So a equals 10. So after the comma, it will assume that b is also going to be an integer. Likewise c. So this only works if the data types are the same. So I'll do similar for floats. So I'll call this f equals 4.5f. So I hope you remember why this f is over there. So fb equals 90.3f, and then fc equals 9.7f. Okay, and then we'll just put a character value over there. So we'll call it ca, which equals k. Right. So this is the declaration of our variables. The declaration and initialization. So I hope this is clear. Okay, so let's see how we would use it. So let's say I wanted to print out variable a, right? So printing variable a. So remember, we'll put the printf statement first because that is the command used to write onto the output screen. So our output is the value of variable a is. So because a has a data type of an integer, you remember which placeholder we put over there? The percentage d. So I'll copy this and paste over here, followed by my new line character. Okay, so after you have put your statement in the double quotation, since we have a placeholder here, we have to specify which variable this placeholder is holding the spot for, right? So we do that after the double quotes. So we put a comma there, and then we put our variables here. So because I have one placeholder, it corresponds to one variable. So the number of placeholders you have there will equal to the number of variables you put after the comma. Right. So let's run this using F9 again and then see what happens. So if we go over to our code session, you can see that we have, so this is the very first printf statement you have, but the second one is what we just printed. So we have the value of variable a is 10, right? So going back to the code, you can see that it didn't print percentage d, but it took the value of a and placed it at the spot where percentage d was. So that's why we said that placeholders simply hold the spot for a variable. So I hope it's clear. Okay, so pause the video for a while and see if you can print out percentage b, variables b and c, and then we'll continue. Okay, so if you're able to do it, then you should have what I'm coming to type over here, right? So I'm just going to copy this and put it here. So since the variable is the same, I just change the name here and then change the variable as well. And then I do the same thing for C, right? Okay, so running this program now should give us the following output. So we have, this is a new session. The value of variable a is 10, the value of variable b is 40, and the value of variable c is 100, as we declared and initialized. Okay, going back to our code. So percentage d is for integers, so try not to mix the placeholders. Don't use percentage f for integers or percentage c for floats, right? What can happen is that sometimes you might get unexpected results. Either you get a value of 0, or sometimes you get some random number or some random characters, or sometimes it will just not run at all. It can actually crash your program. So you have to know the data type of whatever you want to print before you actually use it, right? So now I'm going to get rid of this one, or I'm going to comment it out so that we don't see it again. Okay. So here I've used three different printf statements for each of the variables. So what if I wanted to print all of them on the same line, right? So let's just comment this. So printing multiple variables using one printf statement. So in this case, let's just see how we'll do it. So the values of variables a, b, and c are. So if I wanted to print multiple variables, as you guessed, all I need to do is replace the number of placeholders, and then it will come. So this time, because I have three placeholders, I need three variables over here. So comma a, comma b, and comma c. So as many placeholders as you have, that's how many variables you also have there, right? So let's run this and then also see what the output will look like. So if we go to the output, we can see that we have the statement over here. The values of variables a, b, and c are 10, 40, and 100, and we know that that's correct. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to replace. So we've seen how the integers work, right? So let's also see how the floats work. So I'll just copy these three statements, lines 32, 34, and 36, or whatever numbers they may be in your case. So we have printing floats here, right? So this is going to be similar, except that we are going to use the placeholder for floats, right, which is percentage %f. So I'll change this to f, f, and f. So I'll have to change the variable to the appropriate variable. Right, so fb and fc. Oops, sorry, I forgot to switch back to it. What I meant is we want to do the same for the floats. So I've copied these three statements over here, and I've simply changed the parameter. So the value of variables fa, we have fb here and fc. So you can see here I've replaced the percentage %d with percentage %f, which is the placeholder for a float, right? Okay, so if we run this, we should expect to see that we have the values 4.5, 90.3, and 9.7f. So running this. Okay, so let's go to our output and see what we see. And yes, we actually have those values. So we have 4.5, 0, 0, 0, 0. We have 90.3, 0, 0, 0, 3, and then 9.7, right? Okay, so what happens is anytime you use percentage %f as it is, you get a default of 6 decimal places, as you can see over there. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So you can see there's something happening with variable fb, right? The value that we declared was 90.3 over here, f. But the value we are getting in the output is 90.300003. So you might be wondering, where did this 3 come from? So it's something to do with the fact that if you are working with floats, the computer doesn't use an exact value. Let's say if you type in 90.3, sometimes it cannot actually use that, but it will use something approximately close, and that's why sometimes you might get these, right? But in most calculations, this variable of this, or at this point, sorry, shouldn't cause any errors in your computations. Okay, so let's go back to our float. So remember we said for percentage %f, so percentage %f defaults to 6 decimal places. So sometimes you might not actually want 6 decimal places, right? You might want maybe just 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places. So in that case, we can use another version of percentage %f. So the normal one we know is percentage %f, right? The modified version is percentage %nf. where n is the number of decimal places you want. So for example, if I wanted 2 decimal places, then what I'll type is %.2f. So this gives us 2 decimal places. I hope this is clear. So if I wanted to rewrite these 3 statements, right, what I will do is I'll simply bring it here. So I'll put my point 2, and then point 2. So rerunning this program, if we go back to our output scene, you can see our new values now truncated to 2 decimal places. So 4.50, 9.30, and 9.7. Okay, so that's cool. So let's go back to our code, right? So now let's see what happens if I should, let's say I wanted no decimal places at all. That means I'll put 0.0 there. That means 0 decimal places, right? And let's run this again and see what happens. So now you can see that the variables that you have there are not what we or what we declared. We now have 5, 90, and 10. When initially we declared them as 4.5, 90.3, and 9.7, right? So what happens is that the values of the variables are not actually changed, but what is displayed is what is altered. So because you said you wanted no decimal places, what happens is that it is going to simply round these numbers to the nearest whole, since you don't want any decimal places. So 4.5 will go all the way to 5, 90.3 will come down to 90, and 9.7 will also come down to f, right? I mean, will come down to 10, sorry. So I hope that's clear. Okay, so I'm going to leave the characters for you to practice. If you have any questions or comments or are getting any errors, please comment or post it in the comments, and as usual I'll try and get to you as soon as I can. Okay, thank you very much.